I stared at Tom's back as he walked away, his sister Nancy trailing behind him like an obedient lapdog. "Maggie, taking care of your mother-in-law is your job while we're gone. Don't mess it up," he tossed over his shoulder without even a glance in my direction. As the front door slammed shut, I let out a long breath, my shoulders sagging. 4 weeks alone with Caroline, Tom's bedridden, mute mother. The same woman who had treated me with thinly veiled disdain from the moment I'd married her son 5 years ago. I trudged up the stairs to Caroline's room, dreading the next month. She lay motionless on the bed, her pale, wrinkled face expressionless as always. "Well, Caroline, looks like it's just you and me," I muttered, receiving no response. The first week passed in a blur of monotony. I fed Caroline, bathed her, changed her bedding, all while she stared blankly ahead, never uttering a sound. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. On the 8th day, something shifted. As I leaned over to adjust Caroline's pillows, her bony hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. I gasped, meeting her piercing blue eyes for the first time. "Enough of this charade, Maggie," she rasped, her voice rough from disuse. "We have work to do." I could only gape at her, my mind reeling. Caroline pushed herself upright, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. "But how? You've been—" "Pretending," she finished, a wry smile tugging at her lips, playing the helpless old woman to avoid dealing with my wretched family. As she began to explain, revealing a web of deceit and cruelty I'd never imagined, a fierce determination took root within me. Tom's betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever known, but now with Caroline's help, I would unravel every last secret. The game was on. As Caroline's revelations sank in, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Shock, anger, betrayal. I had always known Tom's family was a little off, but this was a whole new level of depravity. "How could you let them treat you like that?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. "You're their mother, their own flesh and blood." Caroline's expression hardened. At first, I tried to fight back, but they slowly stripped me of everything. My money, my power, even my dignity. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. Her eyes bored into mine, icy and resolute. "That's why we have to stop them, Maggie, before they do the same to you." A shiver ran down my spine at her ominous words. Was that Tom's plan all along? To isolate me, make me dependent on him and his vile family? The thought made me sick. "Start from the beginning," I urged Caroline. "I need to know everything." And so she told me a sordid tale of greed, manipulation, and outright cruelty that made my blood boil. How her late husband's inheritance had sparked a vicious power struggle within the family. How Tom and Nancy had slowly turned against her, stripping her assets and forcing her into a life of subservience, all under the guise of caring for their poor, helpless mother. By the time Caroline finished, hot tears of rage stung my eyes. "Those bastards," I spat, "using their own mother like that." A gnarled hand gripped mine, startling me. "That's why we have to fight back," Caroline stated, her voice laced with steel. "They won't see it coming." A plan began to form, pieces slotting into place like a twisted puzzle. We would follow Tom and his wretched family to Maui, catch them in the act of whatever new scheme they were hatching. And when we did, justice would be ours. Over the next few days, Caroline and I hatched our plan. She knew someone who could help us, an old friend named Mark who used to work as a private investigator. "Are you sure we can trust him?" I asked warily as Caroline dialed the number. She shot me a reassuring look. "Mark's one of the few decent people left in this world. He'll help us bring those snakes down." The phone call was brief, but by the time Caroline hung up, a sly grin had crept across her weathered features. "He's in. Said he's been itching for some juicy drama to sink his teeth into." A surprising burst of laughter escaped my lips. Who would have thought sweet demure Maggie Owens would be plotting an elaborate revenge scheme? If Tom could see me now— The thought of my treacherous husband sobered me instantly. Caroline must have noticed my change in demeanor, because she reached out and gave my hand a comforting squeeze. "I know it hurts, dear. Believe me, I understand the pain of having your own family betray you." Her eyes hardened. "But that's exactly why we have to do this, to show them we're not just a couple of helpless old ladies to be manipulated and cast aside." Her words lit a fire in my belly. She was right. For too long, I had meekly accepted the crumbs Tom and his vicious brood deigned to toss my way. But not anymore. This time, we would be the ones calling the shots. Mark arrived 2 days later, a rumpled but kind-looking man in his 40s. As Caroline introduced us, I studied him carefully, looking for any signs of dishonesty or ulterior motives, but his warm brown eyes crinkled with genuine compassion as he shook my hand. "Don't you worry, Maggie," he said in a gentle southern drawl. "We're going to nail those lying snakes, but good." And so we got to work, poring over flight manifests and hotel reservations, mapping out every step of Tom's upcoming trip to Maui. With each detail we uncovered, my resolve solidified like steel. Finally, the day arrived. As I stood in the kitchen watching the black Suburban pull away, Tom's stupid smug face visible through the tinted windows, I felt a surge of vicious satisfaction. Let him enjoy this little vacation. It would be his last taste of freedom before everything came crashing down around him. I turned to find Caroline and Mark watching me, twin expressions of grim determination etched on their faces. Time to go hunting. With Tom and his family now en route to Maui, the real work began. Mark sprang into action, a whirlwind of phone calls and computer searches as he dug up every scrap of intel on their targets. "This Tom fella sure loves his luxury resorts," he muttered, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "But we can use that against him." Caroline and I huddled close, watching with bated breath as Mark cross-referenced hotel listings and flight schedules. Finally, he circled something with a triumphant flourish. "Got it! They're staying at the Grand Wailea Resort. Pricey place, but that means more staff to bribe for information." He shot us a conspiratorial wink. A sly grin tugged at Caroline's lips. "Excellent work, Mark. Now about getting us over there discreetly." By the time Tom's sniveling voice crackled over the answering machine with some half-baked excuse about needing to extend their stay, we were ready. Fake identities, meticulously forged documents, Mark had covered every base with the same care as a master artist crafting his next masterpiece. The morning we left, I stood in the driveway, squinting against the harsh Arizona sun as I drank in the sight of my quaint little house. Once upon a time, it had represented everything I'd ever wanted: a loving home, a caring husband, maybe even children someday. Now it was just another empty facade, a monument to the lies my life had become. Tossing my suitcase into the trunk with a decisive thunk, I slid into the back seat beside Caroline. Her face was set in stony determination, any traces of frailty or fear utterly banished. This was a woman who had stared into the depths of betrayal and emerged emboldened, ready to face any challenge head-on. As Mark peeled out of the driveway, I twisted in my seat for one last glimpse of the house rapidly disappearing behind us. A strange sense of finality washed over me, as if I were shedding an old, tarnished skin and being reborn into something new, something stronger, uncompromising, unafraid. This time, there would be no more lies, no more hiding in the shadows while others schemed and plotted in the light. This time, the snakes would get their just desserts. Maui was every bit as beautiful as the glossy travel brochures promised: sun-drenched beaches, swaying palms, and crystal-clear waters that seemed to beckon weary souls. Too bad we weren't there for a vacation. Mark had booked us a modest room at a different resort, far enough away to avoid any accidental run-ins with Tom's crew. Not that they'd recognize us anyway, thanks to his meticulously crafted fake identities. "First order of business," he said, tossing a stack of crisp bills on the rickety table, "is getting eyes and ears inside the Grand Wailea." Caroline's eyes glinted with determination. "Leave that to me, dear. I have a few tricks left up my sleeve." True to her word, within 48 hours, she'd made some very lucrative friends among the resort staff: a maid, a bartender, even the concierge. All it took was flashing a little cash, and they were more than happy to keep their eyes peeled for any suspicious behavior from the Owens family. The first report came 3 days later, delivered in a hushed voice over burner phones like we were deep undercover spies. Becca, the maid, had spotted Tom getting awfully cozy with a pretty young blonde by the adult pool, hand-holding, whispered endearments, the works. White-hot rage lanced through me at the mental image. So not only was the bastard cheating, he was bold enough to do it right under his family's noses? I fought the urge to hurl the phone across the room as Caroline flashed me a sympathetic look. "There's more." Becca continued in a trembling voice. I overheard Nancy and that trollop Becca talking about some kind of plan to cut you out, Maggie. Make it look like you just up and left Tom high and dry so they could take the house. The room seemed to spin around me as the weight of her words sank in. So that's what this whole sick charade had been about, robbing me of everything I had left, leaving me destitute and alone. Tears of fury stung my eyes as Caroline reached out to grip my arm, steadying me. "Breathe. Maggie," she murmured. "We've got them right where we want them." Taking a shuddering breath, I forced myself to nod. Caroline was right. Panicking now would only play right into their hands. We had to stay focused, gather every last shred of evidence to crush them utterly. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Sordid details of Tom's affair, overheard conversations about their insidious plot to steal my home and inheritance. With each new revelation, the white-hot anger burning in my chest flared brighter, becoming an inferno of righteous indignation that threatened to consume me. Finally, the night before we were scheduled to strike, Mark gathered us around the cheap motel table with a grim look. "We've got everything we need to bury those snakes," he stated, his deep voice laced with conviction. "Photos, recordings, the whole 9 yards. They won't be able to talk their way out of this one." Caroline reached across the table, grasping my hand in a vice-like grip. "Are you ready, dear? Once we start down this road, there's no turning back." Meeting her blazing gaze, I felt something shift deep inside, a sense of unshakable purpose, of being in the dead calm eye of the storm before all hell broke loose. This was it, the moment everything changed. "Let's do this," I said, the words ringing with a cold finality. Tomorrow, the Owens family would reap what they'd sown, and this time, I'd be the one dealing the blows. The next evening, showtime arrived. Mark had managed to score us a reservation at Ferraro's, one of the ritziest restaurants at the Grand Wailea, the perfect place to spring our trap. As the valet whisked our rental car away, I smoothed my hands over the slinky black dress Caroline had insisted I wear. "You want them squirming, dear," she'd said with a wicked glint in her eye. "Give them something to look at." The maitre d' led us through the opulent dining room, weaving between tables filled with vacationing millionaires obliviously enjoying their overpriced meals. My heart was pounding a staccato rhythm in my chest as we approached our destination, a semi-secluded alcove near the back, perfectly positioned for our little encounter. They were already there. Tom, resplendent in a tailored linen suit that probably cost more than my car. Nancy, draped in gaudy jewels befitting a faded aristocrat. And beside them, the pretty young blonde I recognized from the photos, Becca, Tom's latest conquest. I felt Caroline tense beside me as we approached, no doubt fighting the urge to rush forward and unleash decades of pent-up fury. Mark's reassuring hand on my elbow was the only thing keeping me grounded. Tom was the first to notice us, his brow furrowing in confusion that quickly morphed into ill-concealed panic. "And Maggie? What are you doing here?" Well, if it isn't the happy family," I drawled, surprised by the biting sarcasm dripping from my words. "Enjoying your vacation, Tom?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, shooting panicked glances between me and the oblivious Becca. Nancy, never one to be upstaged, puffed out her bony chest in a pitiful attempt at bravado. "And just what is the meaning of this, Maggie?" she snapped, lips curling into a condescending sneer. "Barging in on our family holiday, putting on such a shameful display. Can it, Nancy?" The words sliced through her tirade like a hot knife through butter. We both know this is no family vacation. With a deft flick of my wrist, I spread the damning photos across the crisp linen tablecloth. Tom draped all over Becca by the pool, whispering into her ear, his face drained of color as his mistress's pretty features contorted in shock and revulsion. You've been watching us?" he choked out, hands trembling. A cruel smile twisted my lips. "Among other things, care to explain to your little friend here about your plan to steal my home, my inheritance?" Becca's head whipped around, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and bewildered hurt. "Tom, what is she talking about?" The question seemed to catalyze something within him. Suddenly he was on his feet, fists clenched, a vein pulsing angrily in his forehead. "You stupid little he snarled, seemingly forgetting we were surrounded by gawking onlookers. That's when Caroline made her move. With a spryness that belied her age, she shot out of her seat and seized him by the lapels, slamming him back into his chair with a surprising burst of strength. "Not another word out of you," she hissed, her face a mask of pure venom as she loomed over her cowering son. "You've tormented me for the last time." Tom's eyes bulged in shock and terror as he finally registered the woman restraining him, the same helpless old crone he'd been belittling and demeaning for years. "Mom? But how?" The sickly sweet smile she turned on him then was somehow more chilling than any glare. "What's the matter, Tommy? You look like you've seen a ghost." The shocked silence that fell over our secluded alcove was deafening. Tom stared up at his mother in abject horror, as if she'd grown a second head right before his eyes. Nancy looked equally stunned, her bravado evaporating like smoke. "But you were bedridden," Tom finally sputtered, grasping at straws. "We took care of you, Mother, after Dad died and left everything in shambles." "Don't you dare play the victim with me, Thomas Owens." Caroline spat, her frail body practically vibrating with pent-up rage. "Not after what you and your wretched sister did to me." Her piercing gaze swung to Nancy, who shrank back in her chair. "Stripping me of my assets, my dignity, my very identity, all for that blasted inheritance. Did you really think I wouldn't eventually catch on to your game?" It was like a dam had burst. Years of deception, manipulation, and suffering came pouring out in a torrent of recriminations. Caroline laid it all bare. The vicious power struggle that erupted after her husband's death, the slow erosion of her autonomy at the hands of her own children, the utter disregard they'd shown her as a human being. "We did what was best for the family," Nancy attempted feebly, but her protests were swiftly silenced by a withering glare. "Best for the family?" Caroline laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Or best for your own greed? I may be old, but I'm not senile. I know exactly what you two vipers were planning here in Maui." She jerked her chin toward the still scattered photos, Tom and Becca's indiscretions laid bare for all to see, using this little tramp to cuckold Maggie, make her look unhinged so you could steal her home out from under her, just like you did to me. Becca made a small, pained noise in the back of her throat, tears welling in her wide eyes. Tom reached out a placating hand, but she flinched away, revulsion etched across her delicate features. Is that true?" She turned to me, anguish and betrayal writ large. "Were you just using me to take everything from your wife?" The lost, broken look on Tom's face would have almost been comical if the situation weren't so twisted. His mouth worked soundlessly as he floundered for an excuse, any lie to salvage what was left of his pathetic charade. In the end, he simply slumped back in his chair, a puppet with its strings cut, defeated. Nancy, however, wasn't quite ready to surrender. Rounding on me with bared teeth, she hissed, "You little bitch! After everything we've done for you, putting a roof over your head, clothes on your back." "That's enough." The words sliced through Nancy's vitriol like a blade, cold and utterly devoid of mercy. Straightening to my full height, I met her hateful glare with an icy one of my own. "Your lies and manipulations end here," I stated, each word ringing with finality. "The Maggie you knew, the sweet, naive little doormat, is gone. Don't like it?" I gestured to the surrounding diners, gawking in scandalized fascination. "Too bad. The whole world can see you for what you really are now." A muscle twitched in Nancy's jaw, but she seemed to realize the futility of arguing. Slowly, almost grudgingly, she sank back into her seat in sullen defeat. As I surveyed the shattered remains of the Owens clan, a strange sense of lightness washed over me, as if a crushing weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders after all this time. The anger, the hurt, the years of rage and resentment, it all seemed to melt away in that moment, leaving only a hollow sort of pity in its wake. These were just sad, small people obsessed with wealth and status, to the point of self-destruction. By trying to control me, they'd ultimately lost everything. Their money, their standing, even each other. And in the end, their defeat was entirely of their own making. The flight back from Maui was a blur. Caroline and I huddled together in the emergency exit row, sipping tiny bottles of bourbon and relishing the silence. For once, there were no snakes waiting to strike from the shadows, just the promise of a new beginning. Mark had already made arrangements to handle the legal ramifications of Tom's exposed misdeeds. With his connections and the wealth of evidence we'd gathered, he assured us that the appropriate authorities would be brought into the loop to address any potential criminal charges. As for me, I simply didn't have the energy to even think about pressing charges or going through a lengthy legal battle. I just wanted to move on. The first thing I did when we returned to Arizona was put the house on the market. It didn't take long to find a buyer. Tom's family had done me the favor of selecting a home in a prime neighborhood. As I signed the final paperwork that transferred ownership, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness watching the new owner's excited expressions. Try not to make the same mistakes I did, I couldn't help but murmur as I handed over the keys. With the house settled, it was time to decide my next steps. Caroline and I spent an evening camped out at a local diner, poring over maps and apartment listings as we tried to figure out our new path. "I was thinking somewhere new," she said, tracing her finger over the map. "A fresh start, away from all these bad memories." I nodded slowly. As much as I'd once loved the idea of settling down in the suburbs, raising a family of my own, that dream felt tainted now, irrevocably tarnished by Tom's betrayal and the upheaval that followed. Maybe it was for the best to leave it all behind, to forge ahead into the unknown. "I'm open to it," I agreed. "Any preferences?" Caroline's eyes took on a distant look as she studied the map. "You know, I've always wanted to see New England in the fall. The changing leaves, the crisp air." She let out a contented sigh. "It seems like it would be a lovely place to plant some new roots." I couldn't help but smile at the image she painted, the two of us surrounded by vibrant autumn splendor, finally at peace after the turmoil we'd endured. A chance to reinvent ourselves in a place where the Owens name meant nothing. New England it is, then. In the weeks that followed, we began making preparations for our new life, selling or donating what little we had left in Arizona, researching potential towns and job prospects in the Northeast. With each day that passed, it became easier to shed the weight of the past and look ahead with a sense of renewal. On the morning we were set to depart, I took one last walk through the empty house. Upstairs, I peeked into the room that had once been mine and Caroline's command center. It's covered in maps and photographs detailing every minute of our revenge plot. So much had happened within these walls, so much hurt and anger, yes, but also a reckoning long overdue. A bittersweet smile tugged at my lips as I turned away. The past was the past, the slithering shadows forever banished. Whatever lay ahead in New England was still a mystery, but this time I vowed to march forward with open eyes and a fearless heart. After all, we had already faced down the worst the Owens family could throw at us. From here, the path could only lead forward. As I made my way down the stairs one final time, I felt lighter than I had in years, free of the burdens that once weighed me down. Out in the hallway, Caroline was waiting with an expectant look. "Ready, dear?" she asked, a warm, conspiratorial smile curving her lips. Returning her smile, I gave a decisive nod. We had made it through the shadows. Now it was time to embrace the light.
My sister walking with such a shabby husband, she still can't get her life together, as usual. I don't mind what people say about me, but I can't stand them speaking ill of my husband. When my husband and I went out, we accidentally ran into my sister and her husband, who used to be my fiancé. The malicious grin on my sister's face that wouldn't stop made my past traumas flash back. I felt as if I was being blamed, though I had done nothing wrong. I am the middle of 3 sisters, with a beautiful and famous younger sister. Our parents raised my cute sister like a treasure, but always compared her with me and sighed in front of ordinary me. Moreover, my sister stole the fiancé who was about to marry me. But unexpectedly, I met my beloved husband and was blessed with cute children, and I thought I had finally grasped my happiness. Why am I looking down like that time again? You always looked down on me like that, didn't you? Those words slipped out of my mouth after years of not seeing my sister, and she laughed scornfully. Big sister, you were so miserable and pitiful, it was unbearably funny. My hands are trembling. Is this from sadness, or is it from anger? If I were my former self, I would be sucked back into those negative emotions. I decide to break free from the past. I raise my head and look straight at my sister, who was once called a beautiful girl, but now her resemblance has faded. This is a farewell. To the painful past, to the pitiful me, and to the sister in front of me. No more mercy. That's the end of such rude remarks. I am Kate Brown. 45 years old. While raising 2 elementary school-aged children, I work at the same company as my husband, Steve. We have a decent income and lead a satisfying life. If I may talk about myself, my life turned around after I met my husband. Born in the middle of 3 sisters, I was called a bad child by my parents. Especially, I was often compared to my excellent younger sister, and each time, my parents would sigh. Furthermore, my sister had a well-formed face, unbelievable to have come from my father and mother. At that time, she was a famous beauty in the neighborhood, and the parental doting on her was tremendous. My parents always affirmed whatever my sister said and never scolded her. And the sister, raised with money and affection, grew into a very beautiful and smart woman. My sister and I were often compared, especially I, who had worse grades than my sister, received all the scolding from our parents. Why can't you do like your sister? It was painful to be asked something that had no answer. My parents only praised and boasted about my sister. By the time I graduated from high school, my parents had no expectations for me, and I got a job at a small local company. There, I met a man. His name was Jim, an older man working at a client company. It's easy to imagine that I, who had just started working, was smitten by him, who handled his work smartly. Moreover, Jim, who I could only send passionate glances to since I lacked confidence in myself, asked me out. Surprised but overjoyed, before I knew it, I had accepted his proposal. I hadn't had happiness in my life, so God gave me a present. I seriously thought so, but happiness crumbled quickly. It was the day he came to greet my parents. The moment he saw my sister, I understood. He was captivated by my beautiful sister. I immediately noticed his heated gaze at my sister, so I escaped home as soon as the greetings were over. Distressed, I confronted him several times. "You love me, right?" "Of course," he said, trying to calm me down, but I couldn't settle down. The image of my smirking sister stuck in my mind. So, the day before our planned marriage registration, when he called me out, and I saw him holding hands with my sister waiting there, I was stunned but also thought in the corner of my mind, I knew it. I don't remember what the 3 of us talked about. Maybe the shock was too great, and my brain wasn't working. I only understood that he and my sister were going to get married, and my sister's words. "He is too good for you, big sister." Then, when my sister suddenly announced her marriage, my parents didn't oppose it, rather, they were more delighted than when I announced my marriage. Indeed, my parents only saw my sister. Losing my fiancé and feeling like I had lost my family, I couldn't recover from the sadness and became confined to my room. I was in so much pain I wanted to disappear. But only my kind sister, who had always been kind since childhood, stayed by my side, allowing me to recover little by little. I really can't thank my sister enough. Then, as I was wondering what to do next, my sister suggested I move out, taking this as an opportunity. With no lingering feelings for my parents or my ex-fiancé, I decided to move to a faraway town as my sister suggested. When I submitted my resignation, a boss mentioned that he had a connection in that town and offered to introduce me to a job. It was an offer I couldn't wish for more, as I was looking for a new job at that time. When I went to the introduced workplace, the boss's acquaintance waiting there introduced himself as Steve. He was a seemingly unimpressive man, 6 years older than me. However, one time, when I brought canned tea to tea-loving Steve, his narrow eyes softened further in thanks, and I felt a liking for him. After that, though I thought I had had enough of romance after the incident with my former fiancé, being enveloped in Steve's gentle atmosphere made it natural for us to start dating. The time we spent together was very calm, and just sitting and talking in the room made me feel fulfilled. When the number of years we had been dating was about to hit double digits, Steve proposed to me. Honestly, I was surprised by the proposal because I had somewhat given up on marriage, but there was no reason to refuse. Steve knew about my family situation, so we didn't inform my parents and had a small wedding just for the two of us. The ceremony in a small church surrounded by greenery, blessed by sunlight filtering through trees, was very romantic. Furthermore, I, who was 35 at the time and had given up on having children due to my age, was fortunately blessed with 2 children soon after. A cute girl and a boy. I was moved by the small lives I held in my arms and vowed to love them equally. Raising children was hard, but one day, when the children were at school and we parents had been busy recently, we decided to take a day off. We didn't have anything particular to do, so we decided to go shopping while taking a walk. Walking through the town alongside my husband, who was wearing a well-worn workman's kimono that had completely lost its shape, we were having a trivial conversation when an unfamiliar voice called out. No, it wasn't an unfamiliar voice. Because the voice clearly said, "Big sister?" When I looked in the direction of the voice, there stood my sister, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. It really is Big Sister. It's been years. I'm happy to see you. Why are you here? We moved. Hey, Jim. It's been a while. Were you doing well? Jim, my former fiancé, was standing next to my sister. I was so surprised that my mouth went dry and I couldn't speak properly. Who is this? My sister seemed more interested in my husband standing next to me than in me. She slowly looked my husband up and down from head to toe. Nice to meet you. I'm Steve, her husband. No way. Big sister, you were married. My sister looked surprised for a moment, but soon nodded and said, then. Hey, big sister. We live nearby. Won't you come over? No, but. It's okay, right? Jim. If you say so, I guess it's okay. We'll entertain you, okay? Despite wanting to refuse, my sister forcefully pulled my arm, and I was still unable to articulate my words properly. Thus, my husband and I were dragged to the tallest high-rise apartment building in the area by my assertive sister. Please have a seat. I'll make some tea right now. The apartment my sister brought us to was on the top floor of a high-rise building. It had large windows that offered a panoramic view of the city, filled with a sense of openness. However, the strong perfume smell, the same as my sister's, permeated the room, making it hard to stay long. My sister offered us a glossy leather sofa. Make yourself comfortable, both you and your husband. You've never sat on such a nice sofa before, have you? My sister said this while deliberately looking at my husband. It was a disrespectful gaze, as if she was doing a favor for poor people. Within a minute of entering the room, I wanted to retort, but my husband, sitting down, said, "Thank you. We won't hold back." I looked at my husband's face in disbelief, but he was already sipping the tea that was served. It's delicious. What kind of tea is this? I bought it as a souvenir when I traveled to Europe with my husband recently. It's something you two would never be able to afford in your lifetime, so please enjoy it to the fullest. Thank you for your consideration. We will. Despite feeling like my patience was running thin, my husband, seemingly unfazed, sipped his tea again. I reluctantly followed his lead and drank the tea. Then, suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the sofa where we were sitting. Excuse me. I've received a call from work. I'll step out for a bit. That's fine. My husband spoke briefly on the phone in the hallway and then addressed my sister and her husband. Sorry, but I need to step out for a bit. May I? Oh, is it work-related? We don't mind at all. My husband thanked them and turned to me. I need to look up something at work. I'll be back soon. Our company was close to my sister's apartment, so it wouldn't take long for him to go and come back. I nodded to my husband. Once my husband left the room and I was alone, my sister said. It's impressive how you work with such a salary that can only buy cheap clothes. It was likely a comment about the workman's clothes my husband was wearing, but I completely ignored her. Judging someone's character based on their clothes and slandering them is shallow and intolerable. My sister, either pleased by my silence or becoming more spiteful, rattled on unilaterally about how she had acquired this or that brand bag and had been to various places. Honestly, I had absolutely no interest in brand goods or my sister's travel anecdotes, and I nearly yawned. Your husband seems very kind. After a long boastful monologue, she abruptly changed the subject to my husband, and I responded, albeit puzzled. Thank you. That's unexpected of you to say. Are you planning to steal my partner again? Of course not. His naive-looking ambition and those cheap clothes suit him very well. He's a bit out of my league. I've been feeling sorry about that time. What now? She was probably referring to the time when our engagement was broken. Well, Jim. It's not your fault. I was just more beautiful than my unattractive big sister. That's right. There was nothing wrong with your sister choosing me. It was just that we were sincerely attracted to each other. Yes, nobody was at fault. It was just unavoidable. What is this farce? What am I being made to watch? It's worse than a cheap daytime drama. My sister continued to be in high spirits as I remained silent in astonishment. Also, Jim is going to be appointed president of the company next month. Is that so? Congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate you celebrating like that. I'm going to be the president's wife. Sorry, big sister. If I hadn't married Jim, you would have been the president's wife by now. Don't feel bad, okay? My sister, clearly not feeling bad at all, showed a triumphant smile. I don't think anything of it, so don't worry. Oh, putting on a brave face? I'm not just putting on a brave face. Oh, really? Even with such a difference between us sisters? While I'm becoming a president's wife, you, at your age, are walking around during the weekdays with a husband dressed like that. My sister laughed mockingly. As usual, your life isn't going well, is it? Faced with my sister's blatant disdain, I remembered my childhood memories and somehow felt everything made sense. Thinking back, my sister, who had always appeared well-mannered, had enjoyed seeing my misfortune, but she had never explicitly expressed malice towards me like this. You've always thought of me that way, haven't you? That's right. Miserable, pitiful, and unbearably funny. Miserable. Indeed, the word suited me when I was at home, disparaged by my parents and having lost my lover. The memories of my unhappy childhood were enough to make me bow my head. However, at that moment, the doorbell rang unusually loudly. My sister opened the door, and my husband came in. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Holding a bag that he didn't have when he left, my husband, who had returned from work, sat next to me and glanced at me with concern. That's right, his calm kindness had indeed healed my once wounded heart. Wanting to reassure him that I was okay, I nodded my head once. I was done being silent and looking down. Is the company where your husband is going to be appointed president here? I took documents out of my husband's bag and spread them out on the table. What's this all of a sudden? How do you know about this? And what is this paper? Indeed, it was so. You'd be wise to shut that disrespectful mouth of yours right now. What did you say? My sister, apparently surprised to be contradicted by me, her expression that had been smug and boastful throughout turned bright red in an instant. Who are you talking to like that? That's right, what's with the sudden rudeness? We invited you here thinking you are the wife's sister. I didn't ask for this. After what happened before, do you think I'm happy to be talking with you? Indeed, you were shocked by what happened back then. I'll say it again, it wasn't your fault. It was just that your charm was less than my wife's. Huh? Say it twice? What are you talking about? Oh, it's about the time when your husband wasn't here. Your wife seemed to be very sad that she couldn't marry me, so I was just consoling her. How could I have ever considered marrying such a man? Suddenly, I felt a chill. Oh. That's quite different from what I've heard. My wife told me about a man who had promised to marry her but cheated right before the registration. That's because she wasn't attractive enough, so I told her not to worry about it. The moment Jim said those words, my husband Steve's face took on an unusually stern expression. Please stop insulting my wife. I didn't mean to insult her. I just meant that she suits a plain man like you. That's right, that's right. A big company president like Jim matches someone like me. Speaking of which, congratulations on becoming president. Ah, thank you. If you ever have trouble with money, just let me know. I might consider giving you a little help. Well, it looks like we're going to have a long relationship. My company is going to acquire yours. What? At my husband's remark, my sister and her husband looked absolutely foolish. Their previously babbling mouths were now awkwardly half open, completely motionless. A brief silence ensued. The first to reboot was my prideful sister. What silly things are you saying? You're just jealous of us, making up such vulgar lies. That's right. Stop joking around. My sister and her husband started making a fuss together. Amidst their clamor that threatened to spill the expensive tea on the table, my husband calmly slid his business card in front of them. Let me reintroduce myself. On my husband's business card was the name of a competitor company of Jim's employer, along with the title CEO. CEO, director? Huh? I can't believe someone dressed so cheaply could be a president. As for the clothes, it's a day off today. Moreover, no matter what my position may be, people like you who judge others by their clothes have no right to say anything. What did you say? My husband often wears workman's clothes because they are light and cool. Despite their being worn and shapeless, my sister has imposed a great deal of prejudice on him. It's his freedom to wear whatever he wants when not in a public setting, but she, crazily shouting lies and unable to understand that, looks downright ugly in her rage. Lies. I can't believe it. President? You're a president like me? Oh. Aren't you just scheduled to become a president, not one yet? Shut up. That doesn't matter. What's this about an acquisition? I don't know anything about it. You don't know? That's funny. Then, you're also unaware that your own company has been performing so poorly that it can't recover on its own? Huh? That can't be. I see. It seems we need to reconsider some personnel decisions. Wait. Don't rush the conversation. Actually, I just received a report at the company that the acquisition negotiations are likely to materialize. You might not believe my words, but perhaps you'll believe the people at your own company. You should check with them. What did you say? Whether Jim liked it or not, a soulless electronic tone rang out. It was Jim's smartphone. Hesitant to answer due to the timing, Jim, urged by my husband, cautiously picked up the phone. Jim's face turned increasingly pale, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. Do you believe the acquisition talk now? What are you trying to say? I wonder why your company's performance is so poor. Even if we hadn't seen each other for a while, we are indeed sisters by blood. That's why I understood when my sister averted her eyes when I asked about the poor performance. You took advantage of Jim's lack of knowledge about the company, didn't you? It must have been easy for you. I've thoroughly researched the company we're acquiring, so don't think you can talk your way out of this. My sister must have understood what I was talking about as she, too, turned pale. Looks like it's time to end this tea party. Shall we go home? That's why I advised her to keep her mouth shut. As we left the room, leaving my sister and her husband behind, an ugly scream came from beyond the door. The rant was indiscernible. But by then, I didn't care anymore. The acquisition by my husband's company went smoothly afterward. During the process, my sister was fired from the company for embezzling money. In fact, I work in the department that was advancing the acquisition plan at my husband's company, and during our investigations, I discovered my sister's wrongdoing. She must have been quite confident it wouldn't be discovered, having pocketed a significant amount of money. After the tea party, I reported my sister's embezzlement to Jim, and an enraged Jim confronted her, leading to the discovery of her affair. It seems my sister had been using the embezzled money to have fun with her lover. After a dramatic showdown, my sister and her husband divorced. It's impressive how the same mouth that spun out those melodramatic lies could do such things. By the way, I know what happened to my sister afterward because, after being divorced and kicked out of her home, she came crying back to our parents' house, and my sister told me so. My sister and her husband now hold the real power at home and had thoroughly turned her away. My parents were still alive and argued that it was pitiful for my sister, but when my sister said she would stop supporting them financially if they let my sister stay, they immediately backed down. Despite their previous doting on her compared to us. I didn't care about my parents anymore, but even I was amazed by this. Having lost her job and partner, and left with only debts from the alimony for her affair, my sister couldn't get help from anyone and is now living a meager life while repaying her debts. Actually, I think I might help her if she comes crying to me. After all, thanks to her stealing my fiancé back then, I now have a happy life surrounded by my kind husband and beloved children.
My name is Lily, and I'm 31. 9 years my senior Larry, and I recently tied the knot. But shall we take a brief diversion first? I'd like to tell you about the day I met Larry. It was at one of our parents' elegant garden parties that they used to throw. Larry, the new emerging star at his father's company, was 29 years old, and I was 20 years old, fresh out of high school. I recall him approaching me while holding a glass of champagne. He said, his voice as silky as silk, "Lily, right. I've heard a lot about you." I blushed, not knowing quite what to say. "Are you Larry as well?" I answered, "I've heard a lot about you too." My heart skipped a beat as I heard him laugh. "Hopefully everything goes well," he remarked. We laughed, spoke, and, to my surprise, connected in a way I hadn't anticipated for the remainder of the evening. Our parents began discussing our marriage when they saw us together that evening. After several more years, their plan eventually came to pass. We both signed a prenuptial agreement before we were married. It was simple. Either of us could dissolve the union and pocket the $7 million if the other cheated. I signed it without thinking because I didn't want to cheat. I recall that day when we signed that contract. My father, a quiet man with a large heart, gave me a worried look. His voice was firm but slightly worried as he questioned, "Are you sure you're okay with this, Lily?" I comforted him, "Dad, it's fine," and gave him a brief hug. Both Larry and I are trustworthy. It's merely a formality. It was Larry who insisted on signing the document, and Larry was present as well. He uttered, "I don't want you to feel pressured, Lily," in a somewhat strained voice. "If you're not comfortable with this, we can talk about it more." However, I simply gave him a smile and shook my head. "I'm okay with it, Larry. I have faith in you." He smiled warmly at me, clearly relieved. He answered, "And I trust you, Lily." That marked the start of our joint journey. Everyone spoke about the lavish ceremony we had for our marriage. I had no idea that a storm was approaching, but I was eager to begin this new chapter in my life. We relocated to a lovely home outside of the city after the wedding. Living with Larry and waking up beside him every morning was like living out a fantasy. For a time, everything appeared ideal with him. He was kind and considerate. Our fairy tale-like honeymoon was unforgettable. We basked in the sun and one another's companionship for 3 weeks at an exquisite beach resort. But things started to change after we got home. Larry changed, becoming a man immersed in contemplation all the time. He began arriving home from work later than usual, and he would go straight to bed without saying good night. We started eating at various times, sleeping in different rooms, and hardly speaking to one another. I chose to face him one day. "Larry," I responded, attempting to maintain my composure. "What's the deal?" Since we returned from our vacation, you have been behaving strangely. His eyes were no longer as warm as they used to be when he gazed at me. He avoided making eye contact and said, "I've just been busy with work, Lily." "But we don't really talk anymore," I said. "We're living like strangers in our own home." With a groan, he combed through his hair. "Lie, I am aware. I apologize. I'll do my best to schedule additional time for us." However, nothing altered. Actually, things grew worse. Even later, often even until the wee hours of the morning, Larry began to return home. We hardly saw each other anymore after he stopped eating with me. I began to have doubts. Was he seeing someone else? The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I decided to confront him again. "Larry," I said one night when he came home late, "are you seeing someone else?" He looked shocked by my question. "What? No, Lily. I would never do that to you." "Then why are you always out? You never spend time with me," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I told you, it's just work," he said firmly. "I'm not cheating on you, lie." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was not the same man I had married. He was distant, cold, and seemed to be hiding something. I didn't know what to do. I love Larry, but I couldn't keep living like this. I decided to start investigating. If Larry wasn't going to tell me what was happening, I needed to find out for myself. I began by checking his phone when he was in the shower. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I didn't find any suspicious messages or calls, but I did find something that made my heart sink. Larry had been searching for apartments. Was he planning to leave me? I confronted him about it. "Larry, why are you looking for apartments? Are you planning on leaving me?" He looked shocked. "No, Lily, I was just looking. I wasn't planning on leaving you." "Then why were you looking?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know, Lily," he said, barely whispering. "I just need some space." One day, I decided to talk to my mom about it. She's always been my support, the person I turn to when things get tough. "Mom," I said, "I don't know what to do. Larry has changed. He's not the same person anymore." My mom listened, concern written all over her face. "Lily," she said, "you're both still adjusting. You're newlyweds. It takes time to build a life together." I wanted to believe her, to think that this was just a phase, and that things would get better. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Larry was hiding something. I could feel it. I tried to push the feeling away, trying to convince myself that Mom was right. But the nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't go away, constantly reminding me that something was off. 3 weeks later, I gathered my courage and approached Larry. "I need a job," I said, looking him in the eye. He seemed surprised. "You want to work?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. "Yes, I need to do something, Larry. I can't just sit at home all day." He thought for a moment, then said, "I can offer you a job at my foundation. We help kids in tough situations. Would you be interested?" I was surprised. Larry's foundation was well known for its work with children, and I had always admired what they did. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'd love to." Working at the foundation was a breath of fresh air. I was busy in doing something meaningful. I met kids who were strong and resilient, kids who had gone through more hardships than any child should. It was heartbreaking, but also inspiring. The job kept me busy and helped me take my mind off the problems at home. Larry and I were struggling, but at least during the day, I had something else to focus on. The work was tough and emotionally draining, but it was worth it. I felt like I was making a difference, like I was doing something important. For the first time in a long while, I felt happy. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was acting strange and distant. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew something was off. I was determined to find out. With a heavy heart full of questions and doubts, I decided to hire a private detective. I needed to know if Larry was cheating on me. It wasn't just about my pride, it was about my peace of mind. I couldn't live with constant uncertainty, always wondering what had gone wrong. There was also the prenup we signed before getting married. If Larry was cheating, it wouldn't just be a betrayal. It would be a costly mistake. I found a detective agency in the city run by a man named Tyler. He was an ex-cop, a seasoned veteran with a sharp eye and a no-nonsense attitude. I told him my story and my suspicions. He listened, his face expressionless. "I'll do my best, Lily," he said when I finished. "But I can't promise anything. If your husband is cheating, he's doing a good job of hiding it." I nodded, understanding. I just need to know, Tyler. One way or another, I need to know. I remember the day he came back to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said. "I couldn't find any evidence that your husband is cheating on you." I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me was glad that Larry wasn't cheating, but another part of me was frustrated. If he wasn't cheating, then why did he leave? What was he hiding? "Are you sure, Tyler?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing at all." Tyler shook his head. "I'm sorry, Lily. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." I thanked Tyler and paid him for his services. As I watched him leave, I felt a deep sense of loss. I was back where I started, with more questions than answers. One day, while I was working at a charity event, a new guy walked in. His name was John. He was handsome, with a smile that could light up the room. He was smart, with a quick wit and a sharp mind. He was funny, with a sense of humor that made everyone laugh. He looked like a famous actor, with his chiseled features and striking good looks. In short, he was my ideal man. But despite being drawn to John, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. His arrival seemed too perfect, too convenient. I couldn't help but think about Larry and our prenup. If I was caught cheating, I'd have to pay a huge sum of $7 million. Could John be a trap set by Larry to catch me? I decided to hire Tyler, the private detective I had used before. I asked him to investigate John and see if he had any connections to Larry. Tyler agreed to take the case and started digging into John's past and connections. He followed him, watched his movements and interactions. Tyler was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. In the meantime, I tried to keep my distance from John. It was hard, especially since he was so charming and attractive. But I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to fall into a trap, not when so much was at stake. One day, John asked me out for coffee. I was torn. Part of me wanted to say yes to get to know him better, but another part of me was scared, worried about what Tyler might find. "I'd love to, John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm really busy right now. Maybe some other time." John seemed disappointed, but didn't push. "Sure, Lily," he said, his smile fading a bit. "Some other time." I felt a pang of guilt. What if I was wrong? What if John was just a nice guy, and I was letting my suspicions ruin something good? But I couldn't take the risk, not until I knew for sure. 5 days later, Tyler came to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes hard. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, "but your suspicions were right. John is working for your husband." I felt a rush of emotions. Anger at Larry for trying to trap me, relief that I hadn't fallen for it, and sadness that John wasn't who I thought he was. But above all, I felt a sense of vindication. I wasn't imagining things. My suspicions were real. "Thank you, Tyler," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "You've done a great job." As I watched Tyler leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had dodged a bullet and avoided a costly mistake. But I also felt like I had lost something, the idea of the perfect man and the hope of finding love again. It was a hard truth to accept, but I wasn't going to let it bring me down. I was stronger than that. I was determined to move on and find happiness again. I didn't need an ideal man. I just needed someone who was real and honest, and I was going to find that person no matter what. Instead of sending John packing right then, I decided to take a different approach. I chose to play along and befriend him, all while keeping my behavior above board so Larry would have no reason to accuse me of anything. John, however, took my friendliness as a sign of something more. He started to relax, thinking he had me fooled. The irony was that he was the one being played, but I didn't let him in on the secret. I couldn't risk him running back to Larry, so I kept up the act and maintained a friendly facade. One day, I decided to take things up a notch. I asked John to join me for lunch, making it sound like a casual discussion about charity work. He agreed with a smug smile on his face, thinking he was making progress. We found a quiet spot in the cafe. "So, John," I began, "how are you finding the charity work?" He shrugged, a confident look in his eyes. "It's good. Different, but good." "And Larry?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you think of him?" John looked surprised. "Larry? He's okay, I guess. Why?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious. He's a bit of a mystery, isn't he?" John laughed, clearly relieved. "Yeah, he can be hard to figure out." We continued chatting about work and life, and I made sure to keep my tone neutral, not giving him any reason to be suspicious. In the days that followed, I continued to play along, keeping up the friendly act but never crossing the line. It was a risky game, but one I was willing to play for now. One day during one of our lunch meetings, John looked at me with a serious expression. "You know, I've been thinking," John said. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a chill run down my spine. "About what?" I asked. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "About us. About this thing between us." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been dreading. I forced a smile. "And what is it that we have, John?" He looked at me with a hopeful expression. "I think we have something special." I felt a pang of guilt. John was falling into my trap just as I had planned, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. Still, I had to keep up the act, had to keep playing the game. So I smiled at John, a fake smile plastered on my face. "Yes, John," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We do have something special." And just like that, the trap was set. The game was on, but at what cost? The Cold War at home with Larry was as icy as ever. We'd occasionally run into each other, exchange chilly greetings, and then retreat to our separate corners. Most nights he stayed at his apartment, claiming it was more convenient for his work. One Friday afternoon, I called John. I laced my voice with warmth, as fake as his documents, inviting him over to my place. He probably thought I was finally ready to give in to his advances. Poor guy, he couldn't have been more wrong. When John stepped into my home, he was greeted not by a seductive housewife, but by my old classmate, now a stern-faced police officer. The surprise on John's face was worth every bit of it. The officer checked John's papers, and as expected, they were as fake as a $5 bill. Now it was my turn to make a move. I offered John a choice. He could either stick with Larry and face the consequences of his fake documents or switch sides and work for me. John's eyes darted between me and the officer, and after a moment of silence, He nodded. He agreed to my deal. Checkmate, Larry. With that, the real game began. I had Larry's pawn now playing on my side, but I knew this was just the beginning. Larry was a crafty man. He wouldn't go down without a fight. In the days that followed, I kept a close watch on John. Despite his agreement, I knew I couldn't fully trust him. He was a wild card, a potential threat. But for the time being, he was a useful one. One day, I called John to my office. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. He looked at me with a hint of unease in his eyes. "About what?" he asked. "About Larry," I replied. "I need to know everything. His plans, his strategies, everything." John hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." I had my insider and my counterattack was ready. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. Larry wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. And in war, there are no rules, only survival. Days turned into weeks, and I was getting anxious. I wanted to confront Larry, to show him I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Tyler, who I turned to again, gave me some advice. "Push Larry," he suggested. "Make him think you've fallen into his trap." It was a gamble, but I was ready to play the game. So John and I staged a photo shoot. We posed in ways that could be seen as compromising, like proof of an affair, but we were careful. We kept the original photos where everything was as innocent as a Friday school picnic. Once the photos were ready, I handed them to John. "Give these to Larry," I said, passing him the envelope. "Let him draw his own conclusions." John looked at me, concern on his face. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once you start this, there's no going back." "I know," I replied, my voice firm. "And I'm ready." The very next day, Larry was all smiles at dinner. He thought he had caught me, that he had the upper hand, but he didn't say a word about it. I wasn't worried. I knew it was coming and I was ready. Meanwhile, Tyler was on the case, digging up dirt on Larry and finding all the evidence we needed. He was good at his job, and I trusted him. Finally, Tyler called me. "Larry's relaxed and has let his guard down," he said, his voice full of satisfaction. "I've got him. I've got all the proof. Photos, videos, everything." I felt a surge of excitement. "Good," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's bring him down." But I didn't confront Larry, not yet. I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized he'd been played. So I waited, playing the part of the dutiful wife, biding my time until Larry made his move. I knew it was coming, and I was ready. The clock was ticking towards the family dinner. I knew this was the showdown. Strangely, I felt calm. I was ready. The dinner was at Larry's parents' luxury mansion, a huge estate that screamed old money. Larry was there, of course, playing the role of the perfect son and husband. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. We were halfway through the main course when Larry cleared his throat and stood up, a smug smile on his face. "I have something to say," he announced, looking straight at me. He pulled out a set of photos of me with John and tossed them on the table like he was holding a winning hand. "Proof," he said, his voice full of triumph, "of my wife's infidelity." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. I was ready for this. I calmly stood up and met Larry's gaze. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I know this man, but he's not my lover. He's an actor hired by you, Larry, to frame me." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with John's voice confessing everything. Larry's smile faded, and his eyes widened in shock. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my own set of photos and videos, evidence of Larry's affairs, and tossed them on the table. "What about these, Larry?" I asked, my voice cold. "Can you explain them?" Larry stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. His parents' faces turned to stone. My parents, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "You ungrateful brat," my father roared at Larry. "We trusted you with our daughter, and this is how you repay us." Larry's mother was in tears. "How could you, Larry?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to us?" to her. The aftermath was swift. We divorced. Larry's parents, furious at their son's deceit, fired him from their company. His reputation was in ruins. As for me, I walked away with $7 million in compensation. Now Larry is jobless, scrambling to piece his life back together, while I'm free. I'm enjoying the peace and quiet, the freedom from him. I won. I took on Larry and won. I outsmarted him and played his own game better than he did. And it feels good. It feels right.
I smoothed my apron and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another Sunday dinner with Gloria. The aroma of roast chicken filled the kitchen, but my stomach churned with dread. "Emily, dear, are you sure you used enough seasoning?" Gloria's syrupy voice drifted in from the dining room. "The last time it was so bland." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that she'd praised that very same chicken recipe just last month. "I'm sure it'll be delicious, Gloria." I called back, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Aaron appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "Need any help, honey?" I shook my head, offering a tight smile. "I've got it under control. Why don't you keep your mother company?" He hesitated, clearly sensing the tension. "You know, Mom means well. She just— Aaron!" Gloria's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. "Come tell me about that big project at work. Emily can manage in the kitchen, I'm sure." I watched my husband's shoulders slump as he turned away, leaving me alone with my simmering resentment. As I carried the platter to the dining room, I caught sight of my reflection in the hall mirror. At 35, I looked older than my years, worry lines etched around my eyes. "There she is!" Gloria beamed, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming in the soft light. I was beginning to wonder if we'd eat before midnight. I set the platter down, forcing a laugh. "Oh, Gloria, you're such a kidder." Aaron cleared his throat. "It looks great, Em, doesn't it, Mom?" Gloria peered at the chicken, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Well, it certainly looks interesting. Did you try that new recipe I sent you?" "Actually, because I specifically remember telling you how much Aaron loves lemon and rosemary. Didn't I, darling?" Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, Emily's chicken is always delicious. Let's just enjoy the meal, okay?" I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the serving spoon. The meal progressed with Gloria peppering Aaron with questions about work, barely acknowledging my presence except to make thinly veiled criticisms about the food or the state of the house. "You know, Emily," Gloria said, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, "I was talking to my friend Marge the other day. Her daughter-in-law works full-time and still manages to keep a spotless home. I don't know how she does it." I gripped my fork tighter. "Well, It's probably because she doesn't have children yet," Gloria continued, her eyes boring into mine. "Speaking of which, when are you two planning on giving me some grandchildren? I'm not getting any younger, you know." The room fell silent. I looked to Aaron, silently pleading for support, but he stared down at his plate. "We're still discussing it," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria squeaked. "Well, don't wait too long. Tick-tock, dear." I abruptly stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need some air." I fled to the back porch, gulping in the cool evening air. Tears pricked at my eyes as I leaned against the railing, wondering how much longer I could endure this weekly torment. The screen door creaked open behind me. "Em?" Aaron's voice was soft, hesitant. I turned to face him, no longer able to hide my distress. "I can't do this anymore, Aaron. Your mother, she's—" I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. "She can be a bit much, but she loves us in her own way." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. "Love? Is that what you call it? She criticizes everything I do, makes me feel worthless in my own home. And you You just sit there and let it happen. Aaron's face fell. That's not fair, Em. I'm trying to keep the peace. What do you want me to do? Choose between my wife and my mother? The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, Gloria's voice rang out from inside. Aaron? Emily? Where did you two run off to? The dishes won't do themselves, you know. I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my resolve crumble. When I opened them again, I saw the conflict etched on Aaron's face. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had become a battlefield, with Gloria as the opposing general. And I was losing the war. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, but its warmth did nothing to ease the chill that had settled between Aaron and me since last night's disastrous dinner. I mechanically flipped pancakes, my mind racing with unspoken words and simmering frustrations. Aaron shuffled into the kitchen, his tie askew. Morning, Em, he mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. I turned to face him, spatula in hand. We need to talk about last night. He sighed, shoulders slumping. Can't we just forget about it? Mom didn't mean... The doorbell's shrill ring cut him off. We exchanged puzzled glances before Aaron went to answer it. Mom? I heard him say, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here so early? My stomach dropped as Gloria's voice carried through the house. Can't a mother visit her son without an interrogation? I brought breakfast. I gripped the counter, willing myself to stay calm as they entered the kitchen. Gloria breezed past me, setting a bakery box on the table. Oh, Emily, dear, you didn't need to cook. I brought those croissants Aaron loves. She wrinkled her nose at my pancakes. Though I suppose we could have both. Wouldn't want your efforts to go to waste. I plastered on a smile. How thoughtful of you, Gloria. Aaron cleared his throat. Mom, this is unexpected. Emily and I were just about to... Nonsense, Gloria interrupted, waving a manicured hand. I have wonderful news that simply couldn't wait. She beamed at us both. I've decided to move closer. I found the most darling little house just 3 blocks away. Won't that be lovely? The spatula clattered to the floor. Aaron's face paled as he looked at me, then back to his mother. Mom, that's quite a decision. Are you sure? Gloria's eyes narrowed. Of course I'm sure. Don't you want me nearby? Especially when you two finally decide to give me grandchildren. She turned to me, her gaze sharp. Speaking of which, Emily, have you seen a doctor about your situation? At your age, fertility can be such a concern. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. We. Mom, Aaron interjected, his voice strained. Emily and I haven't decided about children yet. It's a big decision. Gloria's laugh was like glass shattering. Oh, Aaron, you're not getting any younger either, you know. And Emily, well... She gave me a pitying look. Tick-tock, dear. Something inside me snapped. That's enough! I shouted, surprising even myself. I will not be bullied in my own home. Our family planning is none of your business, Gloria. The room fell silent. Aaron stared at me, wide-eyed, while Gloria's face flushed an angry red. Well, I never, she huffed. Aaron, are you going to let her speak to me like that? I turned to my husband, silently pleading for support. He looked between us, conflict etched on his face. Mom, Emily's right. We need some space to make these decisions on our own. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. My own son, turning against me, after all I've sacrificed for you. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. I suppose I'll just go home and die alone, shall I? As the door slammed behind her, Aaron slumped into a chair. God, Em, what are we going to do? I sank down beside him, emotionally drained. I don't know, Aaron, but something has to change. I can't live like this anymore. He reached for my hand, his touch hesitant. Maybe we should start trying. For a baby, I mean. It might make things easier with Mom. I jerked my hand away, stung. Is that what you want? To have a child just to appease your mother? Aaron's face crumpled. No, I don't know what I want anymore. As I looked at my husband, the man I loved, but who seemed increasingly like a stranger, a cold realization washed over me. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and Gloria's scissors were poised to snip it. Aaron, I said softly, my heart breaking, we need help. Real help. Or I don't think we're going to make it. His silence was deafening, and in that moment, I felt more alone than ever before. The weeks following Gloria's announcement of her impending move blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken resentment. I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone in our bedroom, away from Aaron's conflicted gaze and the constant reminders of our crumbling marriage. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at me, undeniable and life-altering. "Emily?" Aaron's voice called from the hallway. "Are you okay? You've been in there a while?" I opened the door, my face a mask of shock. "I'm pregnant," I whispered. Aaron's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flashing across his face. "Are you sure?" I nodded, holding up the test. "I've been feeling off for weeks. I thought it was just stress, but—" He reached for me, then hesitated. "This is... wow. I mean, it's what Mom wanted, right?" His words hit me like a slap. "What your mother wanted? Is that all you can think about?" Aaron backpedaled. "No, I didn't mean—" "Save it," I snapped, pushing past him. "I need some air." I grabbed my keys and stormed out, ignoring Aaron's calls behind me. The cool autumn air hit my face as I walked aimlessly through our neighborhood, my mind reeling. A baby. Our baby. The one thing that should have brought us closer was instead highlighting the chasm between us. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the familiar car pulling up beside me until I heard her voice. "Emily, what on earth are you doing out here alone?" I turned to see Gloria, her face a picture of exaggerated concern. "Just taking a walk," I muttered. She clucked her tongue. "Nonsense. Get in. I'll drive you home." Too exhausted to argue, I slid into the passenger's seat. Gloria chatted away, filling me in on her moving plans and the latest neighborhood gossip. I stared out the window, my hand unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach. "Emily?" Gloria's voice cut through my reverie. "Are you even listening to me?" I turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of my secret. "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. Gloria's car swerved slightly before she regained control. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," I repeated, my voice stronger. "Aaron and I are having a baby." The car screeched to a halt as Gloria pulled over. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and calculation. "Oh, Emily, this is wonderful news. I knew you two would come around eventually. Have you told Aaron yet? Oh, we must start planning immediately. I have so many ideas for the nursery. Of course, I'll need to be there every step of the way to guide you. First-time mothers need all the help they can get, you know." Her words washed over me in a suffocating wave. This moment, which should have been filled with joy and excitement, felt tainted by Gloria's presumptuous planning and barely concealed criticism. "Gloria," I interrupted, my voice shaking, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Aaron and I need to process this ourselves first. We'll make our own decisions about the baby." Her face hardened. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly need guidance. Why, when I was pregnant with Aaron—" "Stop!" I shouted, surprising us both. "This is not about you, Gloria. This is about me, Aaron, and our child, our family." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Family? I am family, Emily. More so than you, it seems. Aaron will want me involved, you'll see." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Where are you? Mom's here, looking for you. She seems upset." I looked up to see we were parked in front of our house, Aaron standing on the porch with a confused expression. Gloria was already out of the car, striding towards him with purpose. "Aaron, darling," she called out. "Emily has the most wonderful news." I scrambled out of the car, my heart pounding. "Gloria, don't—" But it was too late. As I watched Gloria embrace Aaron, whispering in his ear, I saw the future I had imagined for us slipping away. Our joyous announcement, our private celebration, all stolen in an instant. Aaron's eyes met mine over Gloria's shoulder, a mix of confusion, joy, and something else I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I realized that my pregnancy wasn't just the beginning of a new life. It was the catalyst that would either save our marriage or destroy it completely. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The joy of impending motherhood was constantly overshadowed by the growing distance between Aaron and me. Even more surprising was Gloria's sudden change in behavior. "Emily, dear, you simply must put your feet up," Gloria cooed, fluffing a pillow behind me. In my day, we knew the importance of rest for expectant mothers. I blinked in confusion, unused to this new, attentive version of my mother-in-law. "Thank you, Gloria. That's thoughtful of you." She beamed, patting my hand. "Anything for my grandbaby. Now, let me fetch you some herbal tea. It's excellent for morning sickness." As Gloria bustled off to the kitchen, I caught Aaron's eye. He shrugged, looking as bewildered as I felt. "I guess the baby news really changed things," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. I nodded, unsure how to feel about this unexpected turn of events. Part of me was grateful for the reprieve from Gloria's constant criticism, but another part remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. As the weeks passed, Gloria's overbearing attentiveness began to grate on my nerves. She was constantly at our house, offering unsolicited advice and making plans for the baby's future. Meanwhile, Aaron grew increasingly distant, often working late and seeming distracted when he was home. One evening, as I sat alone in the nursery we'd begun to prepare, I heard Aaron's key in the lock. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. It was past 10 p.m., another late night at the office. Aaron called out softly. "You still up?" I waddled out to the hallway, one hand on my growing belly. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "Long day?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, big project. Sorry I missed dinner." "Again," I added, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Aaron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I said I was sorry, Em. What more do you want?" "I want my husband back," I exploded, months of frustration boiling over. "I want the man who used to be excited about our baby, who used to talk to me, who used to." I trailed off, choking back a sob. Aaron's face crumpled. "Em, I'm trying. It's just, there's a lot of pressure at work, and with Mom always around." "Don't blame this on your mother," I snapped. "She may be overbearing, but at least she's here. Where are you, Aaron? Because it sure doesn't feel like you're in this with me." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I need some air," I muttered, grabbing my coat and keys. "Emily, wait." But I was already out the door, tears blurring my vision as I made my way to the car. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself at a small park near our house. Sitting on a bench, I watched young families playing, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. My phone buzzed insistently. Thinking it was Aaron, I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your husband isn't working late. He's with her again. Lincoln Hotel, room 302. See for yourself." My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I started the car and drove to the hotel, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. As I approached room 302, I heard muffled laughter, Aaron's laugh, followed by a woman's voice I didn't recognize. I stood frozen, my hand poised to knock, when suddenly the door swung open. Aaron stood there, his shirt untucked, lipstick on his collar. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of a young woman hastily buttoning her blouse. Our eyes met, and in that moment, my world shattered. "Emily," Aaron gasped, his face draining of color. "I can explain." But I was already running, one hand protectively cradling my belly, the other wiping away hot tears of betrayal. As I drove home in a daze, one thought crystallized in my mind. I had to protect myself and my baby, no matter the cost. The life I had known was over. Now, I had to figure out how to build a new one from the ashes of betrayal. The days following my discovery of Aaron's infidelity passed in a blur of numbness and disbelief. I wandered our house like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions of daily life while my mind raced with unanswered questions and suppressed rage. Aaron's desperate attempts to explain and apologize fell on deaf ears. I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone listen to his excuses. Gloria, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, hovered anxiously, her newfound solicitousness now grating on my last nerve. One afternoon, as I sat in the nursery folding tiny onesies, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 3 p.m. if you want to know the whole truth." My heart raced. Could this be the same person who had tipped me off about Aaron's affair? Despite my better judgment, I found myself driving to the cafe, curiosity and desperation overriding caution. As I entered, a young woman with sleek blonde hair waved me over. My stomach clenched as I recognized her from the hotel room. "Emily," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm Samantha. Thank you for coming." I sat down stiffly, my hands protectively cradling my belly. "Why did you want to meet?" Samantha sighed, pushing a folder across the table. "Because you deserve to know everything. Aaron's been lying to both of us." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were photos, receipts, and printed emails documenting Aaron's affair, not just with Samantha, but with multiple women over the past year. He told me he was separated, Samantha explained, her eyes brimming with tears. When I found out about you and the baby, I knew I had to come clean. I stared at the evidence, feeling as if the ground had opened up beneath me. How long have you known? A few weeks, she admitted. I've been gathering evidence. Emily, there's more you need to know. Aaron's been embezzling from his company to fund these affairs. He's in deep trouble, and I'm afraid he might try to pin it on me. My mind reeled. The Aaron I thought I knew, my loving, supportive husband, was a complete stranger. A liar, a cheater, and now a thief. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha reached across the table, hesitating before placing her hand on mine. Because I was wrong to get involved with a married man, and I want to make it right. You need to protect yourself and your baby, Emily. As I drove home, my emotions swung wildly between devastation and fury. How could Aaron do this to us? To our unborn child? And how had I been so blind? Entering our house, I found Aaron and Gloria in the living room, their hushed conversations stopping abruptly at my appearance. Emily, honey? Gloria cooed, her saccharine tone setting my teeth on edge. Where have you been? We've been so worried. I ignored her, fixing my gaze on Aaron. We need to talk. Now. Gloria started to protest, but Aaron cut her off. Mom, please, give us some privacy. As soon as we were alone, I slammed the folder down on the coffee table. Explain this, I hissed, Aaron's face drained of color as he flipped through the contents. I can explain. Explain what? I exploded. How you've been cheating on me for a year, how you've been stealing from your company, how you've lied to me every single day. He reached for me, but I recoiled. Emily, please. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Work it out. There's nothing left to work out, Aaron. It's over. You can't mean that, he pleaded. Think about the baby. We're a family. The mention of our child ignited a fierce protectiveness within me. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Our baby deserves better than a lying, cheating father. Aaron's face hardened. You can't take my child away from me. If you try to leave, I'll fight you for custody. Who do you think the courts will favor, a successful businessman or an unemployed housewife? His threat hung in the air between us, and in that moment, I knew I had to be smarter than him. I couldn't let him know my next move. Forcing tears to my eyes, I softened my voice. You're right, I'm just upset. We should talk about this when we're both calmer. Relief washed over Aaron's face. Of course, Em. We'll figure this out together. As he pulled me into an embrace, my mind was already formulating a plan. I would play the forgiving wife, but in secret I would prepare for war. For the sake of my child, I would take down Aaron and Gloria, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. The weeks following my discovery of Aaron's betrayal were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife to perfection, all while secretly preparing my escape. Every gentle touch from Aaron, every sympathetic glance from Gloria only fueled my determination to break free. As my pregnancy progressed, I focused on gathering evidence. Late at night, I combed through financial records, documented Aaron's absences, and built a case that would ensure my freedom and my child's future. The weight of my secret felt crushing at times, but the life growing inside me gave me strength. Then, during a routine checkup, my world shifted again. Mrs. Thompson, the ultrasound technician said, her voice filled with excitement. I have wonderful news. You're having twins. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Twins. 2 precious lives depending on me. As joy and terror warred within me, I realized the stakes had just doubled. Leaving the clinic in a daze, I nearly collided with Gloria, who was waiting in the parking lot. Emily, dear, how was your appointment? She chirped, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I hesitated, then made a split-second decision. It's twins, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Gloria's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Twins? Oh, this is marvelous. Aaron will be overjoyed. We must start planning immediately. I'll call the country club, book the perfect baby shower venue, and of course, you'll need my help more than ever now. I'll just have to move in to assist with the babies. As Gloria rambled on, making plans for my future, our future, without a second thought to my input, something inside me snapped. The facade I'd carefully maintained for weeks crumbled. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria paused mid-sentence. I'm sorry, what did you say? I said no, I repeated louder this time. You won't be moving in, you won't be planning my baby shower, and you certainly won't be making decisions about my children's future. Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly can't handle twins on your own. Aaron and I... Aaron? I laughed bitterly. You mean the man who's been cheating on me for the past year? The one who's been embezzling from his company to fund his affairs? But Gloria's face paled. What are you talking about? That's preposterous. I pulled out my phone, showing her the evidence I'd gathered. It's all true, Gloria. Your perfect son isn't so perfect after all. As Gloria sputtered and denied, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'm leaving him, Gloria. I'm taking my babies and starting a new life, far away from you and Aaron. Gloria's shock quickly turned to rage. You ungrateful little tramp, after everything we've done for you, you'll never get away with this. We'll fight you for custody. You'll have nothing. Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. Try it, I hissed. I have enough evidence to bury Aaron. One word from me and his career, his reputation, everything will be destroyed. As I turned to leave, Gloria grabbed my arm. You can't do this to us. To Aaron. He loves you. I wrenched my arm free. Love, is that what you call lying, cheating, and stealing? No, Gloria. That's not love, and I won't let my children grow up thinking it is. Driving home, my emotions swung wildly between elation and despair. The knowledge that I was carrying twins, 2 precious lives depending on me, filled me with a fierce, protective love. But the reality of my situation, a failing marriage, a deceitful husband, and a vindictive mother-in-law, threatened to overwhelm me. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Aaron's car. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. I had to tell him about the twins, had to gauge his reaction. It would be the final test, the moment that would determine whether there was anything left to salvage or if I needed to accelerate my plans to leave. With trembling hands, I opened the front door, the weight of my future and my children's future heavy on my shoulders. Whatever happened next would change everything. There was no turning back now. The confrontation with Aaron about the twins had been the final straw. His initial joy quickly morphed into panic about finances and how this would affect his freedom. In that moment, I knew there was no future for us. With shaking hands, I packed a small bag and drove to my parents' house, tears blurring my vision the entire way. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as she took in my disheveled appearance. Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong? I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body. Dad appeared behind her, his face etched with concern. They ushered me inside, and through broken sobs, I poured out the whole sordid tale. Aaron's affairs, the embezzlement, Gloria's manipulations, and finally the twins. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. Dad's face darkened with anger. That son of a... I'll kill him. I shook my head vehemently. No, Dad, I need to handle this myself, for the babies. They exchanged a worried glance before Mom asked, What are you going to do? Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. I'm going to divorce him, after the twins are born. The words hung heavy in the air. My parents, shocked into silence, simply held me as I cried. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My parents rallied around me, helping me contact lawyers and make plans for the future. Aaron called incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry threats. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on my health and the babies growing inside me. As my due date approached, the stress began to take its toll. My blood pressure spiked and the doctor ordered bed rest. Confined to my childhood bedroom, I felt like a prisoner in my own body, my mind racing with worries about the future. One afternoon, as I lay trying to nap, I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding as I recognized the voices. How dare you show up here? Dad's voice boomed. After what you've done to our daughter. Please, Mr. Johnson, Aaron pleaded. I just want to talk to Emily, to make things right. There's nothing to make right, Mom interjected, her usually gentle voice hard as steel. You've done enough damage. Leave before we call the police. You can't keep me from my children, Aaron shouted. I have rights. I gripped the banister, my knees weak. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he thought he had rights? Suddenly, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Another pain followed, more intense than the first. Mom, I called out, my voice strained. Dad. The arguing voices below fell silent. Then a flurry of footsteps on the stairs. Emily? Mom's worried face appeared. Oh, God, are you in labor? I nodded, unable to speak through the pain. Dad appeared behind her side, his face pale. I'm calling an ambulance, he said, pulling out his phone. No. Aaron's voice came from behind them. I'll drive. It'll be faster. For a moment we all froze, the tension palpable. Then another contraction hit, and I cried out in pain. Fine, Dad growled, but I'm coming with you. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Aaron kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Dad sat beside me in the back seat, holding my hand and murmuring words of encouragement. As we pulled up to the emergency entrance, a terrifying thought struck me. What if Aaron tried to take the babies? What if he and Gloria conspired to keep them from me? Panic seized me, making it hard to breathe. Dad, I gasped. Don't let him near the babies. Promise me. Dad's eyes met mine, understanding dawning in them. He nodded solemnly. I promise, sweetheart. He won't get near them. As the nurses wheeled me into the delivery room, I caught one last glimpse of Aaron's face, a mixture of longing, regret, and something that looked almost like determination. In that moment, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The doors swung shut behind me, and I steeled myself for what was to come. My children's future hung in the balance, and I was determined to fight with everything I had to protect them, no matter the cost. 3 months after the twins' birth, I stood at the front door of what was once my home, my heart pounding. Dad waited in the car with the babies, ready to intervene if needed. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way to the bedroom, filling a suitcase with my remaining belongings. As I reached for a photo album on the top shelf, a stack of papers tumbled down. Curious, I picked them up, my blood running cold as I realized what they were. More evidence of Aaron's affairs and financial misdeeds. Emily? Aaron's voice startled me. I spun around to see him and Gloria in the doorway, their faces a mix of surprise and anger. What are you doing here? Gloria demanded, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the suitcase. I straightened my spine, clutching the papers. I'm getting my things. I'm leaving, Aaron, for good this time. Aaron's face darkened. You can't take my children away from me. I won't let you. Your children? I laughed bitterly. The ones you've barely seen since they were born? The ones you were ready to abandon when you found out I was having twins? Gloria gasped, turning to Aaron. What is she talking about? I held up the papers. Why don't you ask your perfect son about his affairs? Or about the money he's been embezzling from his company? Aaron lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers, but I was quicker. Emily, you don't understand. I can explain. Explain what? I shouted. Years of pent-up frustration pouring out. How you lied to me, cheated on me, made me feel worthless in my own home. Gloria's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... No, I cut her off. I'm done being silent, done being the perfect, obedient wife. I'm taking my children and starting a new life, away from your manipulation and Aaron's lies. Aaron's demeanor suddenly changed, his voice turning cold. If you walk out that door, I'll destroy you. I'll take the twins, ruin your reputation. You'll have nothing. For a moment, fear gripped me. Then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the love I had for my children. I stood taller, meeting his gaze. Try it, I said, my voice steady. I have enough evidence to bury you, Aaron. One word from me, and your career, your reputation, everything you care about, will be gone. Gloria stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. Now, Emily, let's not be hasty. We're family. We can work this out. I turned to her, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. Family? Is that what you call this? You've done nothing but undermine and belittle me from the day I married your son. Well, it ends now. I grabbed my suitcase, pushing past them towards the door. Aaron grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. You can't do this to me, he hissed. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Watch me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. As I walked out the front door, I heard Gloria wailing and Aaron calling my name. But I didn't look back. Dad was waiting, a proud smile on his face as he helped me into the car. Looking at my sleeping twins in the back seat, a wave of peace washed over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. "Ready to go home?" Dad asked gently. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "More than ready." As we drove away, I caught a final glimpse of Aaron and Gloria in the rearview mirror, standing shell-shocked on the front porch. The sight that once would have filled me with dread now only strengthened my resolve. I had survived their manipulation, their lies, and their attempts to break me. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a beautiful life for myself and my children. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, and a mother who would move mountains for her children. As we turned the corner, leaving my old life behind, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. After all, I had fought the hardest battle of my life and won. Whatever challenges came next, I knew I had the strength to overcome them. The road stretched out before us, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.